It started with baseball cards in the 80s. And my best friend and I started out selling baseball cards on a little fold-up table outside of a strip mall. And
I get it.
His parents totally encouraged it. They would take us out there every Saturday, and we'd set up our table and we'd sell, and then we started going to shows.
Did your family support this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my dad's an entrepreneur, and we can talk about that, but that's where I get it from. But we got encouraged super young to do it, and we spent most of high school running an actual brick and mortar baseball card shop after school.
Really?
Selling cards to the kids. We expanded into comics. I mean, yeah, so.
Interesting.
I've just always been into doing my own thing and earning and selling and all of that.
I can relate because in high school, I don't know where you grew up, but in Phoenix where I grew up, you have the numbers of the address painted on the curb. My buddy and I went to Home Depot, bought some stencils. We'd go door to door, spray painting the address on the curb for $5.
Yeah, that's what it's all about though, right? You're a kid and you want some money, and especially before you're old enough to have a real job, you got to hustle. I mean, it's almost like entrepreneurship is baked in when we're young, and then society takes it out of us.
So interesting. So that was going to be, I was going to ask that later on, but so what do you think it is about some people that really, truly progress and go down that entrepreneurship path and some don't? Is it many different things from just where they are, circumstance, life, ambition?
I think it's two things. One, it's a desire for freedom. It's a desire for self-expression. It's also a little bit anarchist. It's a little bit disdain for rules, structure, and systems, and not wanting to be boxed in by what other people tell you.
So the people that pursue it then, and the people that maybe think like you think but don't pursue it, do you think it's a lack of knowledge, lack of resources, fear?
Fear's a big thing, right? I think it takes courage to be an entrepreneur.
It does.
It takes courage to not do what everybody else is doing, to say there's a different or better way to do something, to be out on your own and be responsible for your outcome.
And it's hard too. I mean, it's not easy to start a business and grow it and sell it, build up a customer base, scale it if that's your goal, and run it. I mean, that's not easy.
It's not easy, but neither is most jobs, right? I mean, most jobs, to get good at them, is not easy.
Yeah.
But for most people, when you go to a traditional job, you have the comfort of a system and a process and a mentor and a team, and maybe less responsibility for the outcome or less perception of responsibility for the outcome. Whereas when you're an entrepreneur, you are assuming personal responsibility for everything.
What lessons did you learn running a baseball card shop, comic shop in high school? What business lessons?
So, I mean, at the very fundamental, you learn about margin. You learn about how do you buy something and how do you sell it, and how do you create enough difference to profit on that.
Interesting.
But you also learn customer service. I mean, selling baseball cards to kids in the neighborhood is really about selling joy to these kids. I mean, my customers were middle schoolers and high schoolers, right? They were buying a card of their favorite player. They wanted that thing. It had personal connection. So there was definitely a big service component to it as well. But the other big lesson we learned was that business lost money the whole time.
How so? Margins weren't there?
No, I mean, we covered the buy and sell of inventory, but his parents were eating a loss on the lease of the location.
Call that a lesson learned.
They were taking a tax write-off so that we could learn about how to run a business.
I wrote a blog on this, actually, believe it or not, on the site, and it was about, at least nowadays, and you'll hear a bunch of people say it, but it's cool to be an entrepreneur. It's a buzzword. It's cool to be an entrepreneur, but the fundamentals of being an entrepreneur or a businessman, or woman, running a business, of tracking those metrics, the numbers, actually running it at a profit, understanding what it costs, the cost to go out and acquire a customer, the cost that you get your product from, and putting all that together in an ecosystem that at the end of the day, throws a profit. Because if you don't throw a profit, I mean, you're just not in business. I'm not saying it's all about profits, but if you don't have that number at the bottom, at the end of the day, it's pretty black and white. You're not in business anymore.
No, I mean, it might be PC to say it's not all about numbers, it's not all about profit, but that's what a business exists for.
Thank you.
It exists for profit. If you can do good while you're making profit, all the better, but it is not a charity. That's a different operation, right? That's something else. And at the end of the day, you do have to learn how to be profitable.
Right.
And a lot of people, it is hip right now, right, to say, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, especially I'm a digital nomad, or, nobody wants a job now, everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. But there's a range of what does that mean?
I've had this same topic too, because actually we did an entrepreneur episode in season 1, and we were talking about the various types of entrepreneur. The example I always use is I've had the same pest control guy. He actually just sold, but for the longest time, excuse me, I had the same pest control guy, Marine Corps veteran, and sure, he ran his own business, and that's an entrepreneur. He made a profit, put food on the table, but at the same time, he was stuck in his business every single day running it. Mm-hmm. And then that's one style of entrepreneur. Then you have maybe these other entrepreneurs that scale a company, the Elon Musks of the world, the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. Those are two separate ends of the spectrum of entrepreneur. And I was always saying it's kind of maybe a personal choice or what kind of lifestyle you want to live that might lead you down that path.
Well, I think what it is so when you think about a lot of people who do start their own business that's in a service-oriented thing, electricians, plumbers, construction companies, whatever it is, a lot of times they're started by somebody who developed a skill, and they say, well, I want to be my own boss, so they start a company, but they don't have a background in building a business.
Well, that's what they know is that skill.
Right, they just know the skill. And so that limits them in their ability to scale to the size they need to be, what is necessary.
Size they need to be, or is that a desire what they want to be? How big of a company they want to have?
No, I think that the problem is you don't have a real business until that business can function without your presence.
Otherwise, you just created a job for yourself?
You just created a job, right. And that's different because how do you sell that company if that company relies on you to be there unless you're going to keep working in it for somebody else? It's not transferable. Not really in what it is. So you need to grow it and you need to develop people around you that make you not irrelevant, but not necessary for day-to-day function. Once you achieve that, then you have a real enterprise.
Well, and we were talking right off camera where you said, and I'm going to totally mess all this up, but something along the lines of, stay small and profitable, and that's fine, or go big, but you kind of where companies kind of get stuck or die is right in that middle space where maybe they haven't really defined what they want to be.
Sure, but even defining what is small and what is big is important, right? So you can think on a bigger scale, there's this idea, I've got to make this huge company, raise all this money, right, become a unicorn. But if you listen to some other entrepreneurs, they'll say, no, what's better is a really profitable $20 million company is better than a $200 million company a lot of the time. Because what it takes to make that growth isn't worth it. You may give up more of the company. You may net out less by being that bigger company.
And what about maybe the stress and lifestyle that comes with that? Is that a factor?
Absolutely.
Because it can't be, I've never done it, but it cannot be easy to build, start, grow, scale a $200 million company. Nothing's easy, but to get to that level, you're now playing clearly on a national scale. And that's a lifestyle I also think that as an entrepreneur, you got to choose. Absolutely. If you want that.
Absolutely. And I don't play in that realm, right? Like I don't know what it is to grow a $200 million company, but even for me, there's the distinction between things that I could do by myself and how profitable could I be doing something solo versus building out a team of, say, 10 people. And do I want that? Because when you have 10 people who work for you, you now have the responsibility of the livelihood of 10 people.
My very first company, I had 12, at our peak, we had 12 employees. More nut of a payroll every month than I want to admit. I had no earthly clue what I was doing, and that was my eye-opening kind of entrance into the entrepreneur space. And that actually led me, and I go back to lifestyle, I don't want this, I'm working 55-hour-a-week lifestyle. I want to go the smaller route where I'm profitable, we have a very healthy business, but I'm on that smaller scale.
Yeah, I've fallen into that trap myself. I've had a business with 12 employees on payroll, and they were all getting paid every month, and I was working 70 hours a week and not drawing a paycheck because there's nothing left for me after I paid them. Right?
So how'd you go from baseball cards to your first, I don't want to say real business because that was a real business, but how'd you go from baseball cards to the first business you opened, and what was that business?
Well, so after baseball cards was college, and it was interesting because my senior year in college, I was in an entrepreneurship class, and the professor told me, he said, I give you 3 years working for somebody else before you're on your own because you're not meant to be an employee. Well, it took me 7 years to get on my own. And what I did was I was fortunate that I met a woman who ended up becoming my wife, but I invested in her. She was a genius programmer. And I said, okay, you're going to build a business to get me out of my job. I will pay everything. I will go to work and I will pay all the bills till you build up this other business.
So she started working on a concept that you were kind of funding and just keeping the lights on while with your job.
Yeah. So she started a web hosting company. This was before Amazon Web Services existed. She built up a web hosting company. We ultimately sold that to a company in Canada, and then we started a company called Cake Central. And this was before Facebook and Pinterest, and it was a website about cake decorating.
Interesting.
And at its peak, we were getting 30 million visitors a month to our website.
Did you have a revenue model behind it? Or
Yeah. We were running digital advertising, and we were making great money, just the two of us.
Wow. Would you go out and be the business side and get the ads and the sponsors? Yeah,
absolutely. So I ran all the monetization for it, and she ran all the creative content, and she also built all the technology that ran it.
Interesting.
And but ultimately, Facebook groups and Pinterest came along and ate up 90% of our traffic. So, we couldn't have foreseen that. We should have sold, at the peak, but because it was such a passion project, our exit point was much higher than we had achieved, before that happened. But that was the transition that, investing in her, identifying her talent, and investing in that gave me the pathway out of employment and into.
When you were on the cake thing, did you do that were you off your day job?
Yeah.
Do that full time?
Yeah. Once we sold the web hosting company, that's when I left. And then we were just, for the rest of my life, I've never had an employer since then.
From each job, each business, have you picked up a couple golden nuggets of lessons that have carried with you to this day?
Oh, it's constant.
Yeah.
I mean, so, the biggest thing is, as an entrepreneur, and people differ on this. Some people say you should just go all in on one thing. What has saved me over time is having more than one business always. And what that has allowed to happen is if something has happened to the primary business or something happens in the economy, I'm able to pivot resources and scale into the second business quickly and not be without income.
What systems do you put in place? You have to put systems in place so each of the businesses under you can function, right? I mean, or is your time just spread so thin over multiple businesses?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's scaled in priority, right? And it's changed over time. When I was younger and I didn't have a kid and, I could just go 70 hours a week, I could put myself a lot into one or two or three businesses. Right. Now I have to put 80% of my time into one and be exposed into other businesses that only need the other 20% of my work time.
Well, that's my problem right now. I'm 80% in two or three different businesses. I gotta figure out with a quickness how to change that.
You do, and it's all about prioritization, right? For me, the big lesson that I learned through failure is that the one thing that you have a limit on is time, and so you have to prioritize because there's a cost benefit to everything. If I decide to give my time to this, I don't have that time available for the other opportunity. And I found myself trapped giving too much of my time to the wrong thing and not been able to scale quickly enough because that thing that was eating up all my time was not going to be the primary revenue driver.
What was your biggest business failure?
I mean, I guess that changes, right? So on what you define as failure. So like in Cake Central, which I described, there was the failure that we didn't exit when we should have. That was a huge... So
did the company just go to zero and you shut it down?
No, it's still running. It's still running. It's making some income, but it's making a fraction of what it was and where we thought it was going. Because on the trajectory it was on, before Pinterest, and Facebook groups, we were waiting out. We were holding out for a $20 million exit.
Oh, wow.
Whereas we could have probably got out at 5. And instead now, we probably couldn't sell it for $200K. So that's a huge miss, right? And then, the big mistake we made in that company.
Did that eat you up at all for the first, I'm sure you're over it now, but for the first while after that, did that kind of get to you?
No.
No?
I think one of the things about being an entrepreneur that is what makes entrepreneurs different is we never stop trying, we never stop believing, we never quit.
True entrepreneurs.
True entrepreneurs. One of the first things I learned back when I was younger was that most millionaires go bankrupt before they become millionaires. Now, I've never gone bankrupt, but that always reminded me that just because you fail in your first try doesn't mean you're not cut out for it, doesn't mean you won't succeed on the next one.
You just have to keep trying.
Right. And you just have to learn and forget.
And I'm still on the hunt. I ask a lot of people this question. It's one of the questions in life is what really makes that person, an entrepreneur, to drive like that, because I could sit here and tell you stories, all day long about how broke I was and, bringing my first son into the world and being dead broke. I mean, that's scary. And most people would probably just say, okay, I'm going to go get a job or fold in the towel. And I could not fold in the towel. I couldn't do it. Just kept trying.
I can't do it because I can't get what I want in life to me, going and getting a job for what I want is giving up. Like, I've lost my purpose, right? Like, for me, I live life every day with a purpose. I act with intention, and I'm committed.
So is this years of your upbringing that led you to I mean, because not everybody has this mindset. Was there anything in your childhood? Do you think people just have different personalities and that's just your personality, or why do you think like that?
I mean, some of it's individual personality, but also, I mean, I was fortunate to grow up in a very stable home with amazing parents. We didn't come from anything. I mean, it was paycheck to paycheck. Like, I remember my mom writing checks at the grocery store on Friday, knowing the bank wouldn't clear it till Monday, and floating that, day or two of difference. My dad dropped out of high school.
Interesting.
My parents got married at 18. My dad entered the Marines during Vietnam. My dad's family was terrible. Like, they put me and our dog in the back of a car when I was 15 months old and drove all the way across the country so I wouldn't grow up near his family. My dad had to get his GED. They moved to Washington State and they did the maintenance in an apartment so that they could get a discount on rent so that they could live. Neither of my parents are college educated, but my dad is an entrepreneur. And
so that helps a little bit. So fast forward a little bit. So after the cake thing, what was the next business?
So really the next thing after the cake thing was the advertising technology company. And that was born out of learning how to monetize Cake Central.
Interesting.
So we had developed the technology and the systems in order to do that effectively. And just in conversations with other publishers, they would say, hey, how are you guys doing this? I'd tell them, and they'd be like, man, could you do that for me?
Advertising, can you give me an example when you say advertising technology?
Sure. So when you're on any popular website and you see those annoying banner ads, maybe it's a ad following you around from Amazon or wherever, those banner ads get there through a technology stack, right?
Okay.
And so we developed a technology stack that connects to the supply, demand. We are the supply, right? They connect to all the major exchanges, get the bids, bring in the best paying ads onto a website. And that's the reason the internet is free, is because you will look at ads while you...
And then you would service clients through this technology. You would go out and get clients that have existing websites and then bring your technology to them.
Right. Yeah. So you go out and you find other websites like Cake Central, right? Like, that have a good audience, that are not big enough to have their own ad technology department, but they're big enough that they can make an income, and we help them do that. So
you've been in the digital space then for a very long time.
I built the first website by a student at my college.
What do you mean by a student?
Well, so when I was in college, you still dialed in through AOL to get on the internet, and you used the Netscape browser. Nobody knew how to make a web page. Like, they didn't even teach it in computer science class at college. So
interesting.
I was, interested enough that when I got onto the internet, I wanted to know, how would you put up your own page? And so I went and found the HTML specification and figured out how to put up a web page.
Did you have to get the domain? Is it like today, go on GoDaddy, buy a domain? Similar type?
Yeah, except that nobody, literally, I didn't know anybody who knew HTML or how to put up a web page.
So you really this is going to get into the second half of our conversation. You had a desire to learn kind of the mechanics, if you will, of technology.
Always.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is all clear to me now.
When I was 8 years old, I got a Commodore 64. And my dad told me, there's one rule. You have to write a program every week or you can't play games on it.
Wow.
So I had to figure out how to write in BASIC, and I'm not some great programmer, but it made me at least think about, what does technology do? How do computers work? What is possible? And always be questioning, what can I make this thing do?
So you've seen I don't know if the birth is the right word, but call it the early days and scale of the internet. And how it's just changed the world, business models, everything.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, my whole life has been about imagining what the internet unlocks for us.
So if you think about it, talking about the plumber and the electrician, you took a skill set, if you will, internet, digital programming, that's a skill set, and you turned it into a business.
Absolutely, yeah. And then I found a partner, right, in Jackie, who could bring all the technical genius side.
Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you about my first business. It was a tech startup, and it crashed and burned because I couldn't even spell PHP or computer server. I had to hire a front-end UI developer, back-end software team, and it was the biggest eye-opening experience of my life.
I can imagine.
That's a whole nother story.
I can imagine. I mean, I had the luxury of having a partner who was the developer. So anytime I had a business idea, I could say, Jackie, can you build this? And she'd go, uh-huh. Great.
How have you had to, let's take the past, call it decade, 5 years in 1 year, then how did you have to morph with the times as social comes more prevalent, different business models rise? What's been some big changes you've seen?
Well, I mean, God, that's a lot of stuff, right? Everything has changed. Some people even say, our blog's still relevant, our website's still relevant. I mean, that's how fast things are changing. It's to the point now where you can build an entire business on just social media. You don't even need the infrastructure necessarily for a lot of opportunity that's out there.
Become an influencer.
Well, sure, an influencer, but you can develop product and sell it, right? You can promote it on Kickstarter and then take your Kickstarter campaign and promote it on social media, put up a YouTube video, and then you need a one-page purchase spot, and that's it. I mean, there's so many ways now that you can build opportunity and entrepreneurship online without even being a coder or
right. Well, I was listening to this podcast a week ago, and I was talking about how the internet combined with this or a cell phone overlaid has created these networks and these opportunities, like you said, did not exist 5, 10, 20 years ago.
Your phone is the single greatest tool you have for making money that exists. You and a cell phone can make money.
But it's also extremely difficult, time-consuming. You got to know what you're doing. A lot of trial and error, a lot of sticking through it to really make a real go at it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you need commitment, you need a vision, you need training and mentorship. You need to find people who are already good at it and figure out how they're good at it. But, I guess for me, coming from an entrepreneur mindset, I just view everything as you can make excuses or you can just go get it done. The resources are all out there. To me, there are no excuses for not getting it done. If you're not getting it done, it's because you're not making the effort.